Good evening, everyone, or good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in this world. It's your host, Danny Dhaiphong. How are you doing? Let me just adjust this mic a little bit higher. How are you all doing? Give me a sound check. It's good to be back with all of you. I just returned from China. Had returned only a few days after the stream with Mark Sloboda. So now I am back with you all, and hopefully we'll be regular streaming from here on out until the next trip, and I will let you know when those are. So give me a sound check. Welcome all to the stream. Please do hit that like button as you come in. It is a big help because it helps boost the stream and the algorithm. I want to say hello to everyone on Rumble and on Rockfin who are watching. Be sure to follow me on those platforms because we never know when these platforms, especially YouTube, will, how should we say, uh, um, come back at us in a not so friendly way, as so many of our friends in this work have experienced. So, with all of that said, I have a big show tonight, okay? We're going to, of course, talk about geopolitics. We have a lot of stories to cover from already the Ukraine aid situation, the United States passing this big aid package. It's gone through, but the disasters are piling up for Ukraine. So I have an update there. I'm also going to talk about something, as the big developments with Iran, with Israel, of course, with the ongoing genocide in Gaza, as those things kind of hit this impasse where it's just this ongoing, rolling development where this looks like a protracted war from here on out. I'm going to go over a really incredible interview. John Mearsheimer absolutely destroying the realist um, geopolitical analyst, intellectual professor. He just absolutely destroyed Piers Morgan, and I had to go over it. So we're going to go over that. And of course, I'm going to talk about China because we have to talk about the aftermath of Antony Blinken's visit. And then, of course, I'm going to talk about my own visit in a separate story and a bonus story at the end. So everyone's going to want to stick around for that. So we have a big show today. All right. So we want to get started right away. Okay. So let's do this. Everyone, of course, hit the like button as you come in, hit the subscribe button. If you're new here, hit the notifications bell as well. I noticed there's a little bit of maybe shadow banning going on here on YouTube now that I've hit this 200,000 subscriber mark. Thanks for everyone who has subscribed. But this is what happens with YouTube. And eventually, what a lot of people have experienced is that repression leads to perhaps eventual elimination. I'm crossing my fingers that does not happen. But nonetheless, you do want to hit the like button. You do want to subscribe. You do want to hit that notifications bell. And of course, the best way to support is going to the video description and subscribing on Patreon for a monthly or yearly amount. Yearly, people tend to like more. Substack is another option. We have YouTube members as well. I want to welcome all YouTube members in the chat, Patreon members, Substack members, and of course, the great moderators who do so much great work for this channel. All right, so let us get started. Okay, so we are going to first talk about Ukraine. And I want to talk about, and we're going to bring friend of the show on, Scott Ritter, his take, which he gave on Sputnik News. And we're going to talk about this aid situation in the context of developments that the mainstream media have reported on that you probably have not been or maybe have not come across because the rhetoric about this aid has been so misleading. So let us get right to this, okay? Ukraine got the aid that Zelensky and, of course, much of the neocon foreign policy establishment had been begging for from Congress, from the U.S. Congress, for many months. Of course, this comes in a big package, over $90 billion, divided between Ukraine, $61 billion, Israel, some odd amount, I believe it was 14 or so billion, and then another $8 billion for for Taiwan. Those numbers are rough, but around there it adds up to about 90 billion. But the Ukraine aid package was the story because it's supposed to be a game changer. Okay, this is supposed to be the aid that not only keeps Ukraine from losing, but gives Ukraine a chance to win against Russia. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. So, let's break down, okay, where this aid is going. What does it all mean? And we're going to have friend of the show, Scott Ritter. He gave this analysis on Sputnik, which I think breaks down well what's in the aid package and how is it actually going to affect things on the battlefield. So let's take a listen.
$61 billion. A lot of money. But let's break it down. 13.8 billion of this will be used to provide weaponry to Ukraine. Now, this is not anything to, belittle. It's a lot of money. That's a lot of weaponry, but it's not 61 billion. There's another 9 billion that'll come to Ukraine in the form of just direct cash assistance. This enables the Ukrainian government to pay pensions, pay salaries, basically do things for the Ukrainian people that the United States Congress is apparently unwilling to do for the American people. But that's a different issue altogether. But will this be enough to turn the tide? The answer is no. The $13.8 billion in military assistance that will be provided to Ukraine will be insufficient to basically halt the Russian advance that's currently ongoing and turn the tide to send the Russians back to, according to the Zelensky formula, the 1991 borders. This isn't just me making this assessment. This is the assessment of Ukraine's foreign minister, Kuleba, who has said that at this late stage in the game, there's no amount of military assistance that can stop the Russian advance. And he's correct. You know, there's talk about magic weapons, the ATACMS, F-16s, more artillery ammunition.
And those attackums, sorry, apologies for the volume being low. It's actually on the side of the recording itself, Spooning, so I'm unable to dial it up much. But in any event, these attackums have actually been already secretly given to Ukraine in order to mount an attack on Crimea. That has been the latest scandal with this aid. Even before the aid package was passed, the United States was trying to funnel weapons. But as Scott says, much of the Ukrainian side is already saying, and I'm going to show you that the United States side is saying this too, that this aid isn't going to really make a difference on the battlefield. So let's continue.
And all these, of course, if they make it to the front line, will complicate the military situation and cause Russia to suffer more casualties and cause the Ukrainians to suffer even greater casualties. But it won't stop the Russian advance. Right now, Russia enjoys military superiority, if not outright supremacy, along the entire line of contact, not just on the front lines, but extending well into the rear areas of the Ukrainian defense uh, areas. As weapons are brought into Ukraine and brought up to the front line, they will be subjected to increasing levels of interdiction. Very little of this military assistance will actually make it to the Ukrainian soldier at the front line. And when it does, the Ukrainian soldier and this equipment will be dispatched relatively quickly by the Russians, who will be tracking this equipment throughout its entire journey from the west to the front lines. No, $13.1 billion, it'll be destroyed relatively quickly. It won't last long, and it certainly isn't going to change the outcome on the battlefield. Russia has the strategic advantage, and regardless of the amount of money that the United States, Europe, or anybody else pours into Ukraine, Russia will retain the strategic advantage until victory.
So that is, I think, a good summary of what is going to happen. It already is happening. Russia is parading M1 Abrams tanks. They're bringing it to their kind of NATO weapons Hall of Fame that they have been collecting since the beginning of this conflict, especially over the last year plus. when Russia just made absolute mincemeat out of Ukraine's so-called summer counteroffensive of 2023. So this aid, really what it does is it not only just prolongs the conflict, but it is going to enhance and increase the amount of death that Ukrainians, especially Ukrainians, and this is almost primarily the case, Ukrainians who are going to be sent out on the front lines, those Ukrainians who are now being chased down by the Ukrainian government to serve in this essentially lost conflict, a conflict that is being propelled and promoted by NATO. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of more Ukrainians will die. Russia will eliminate them because this, of course, is an existential conflict for Russia. They're not going to back down. And Russia has said this from the very beginning. The more aid that you send, the more weapons that you send, it may prolong the conflict, but it is not going to help the situation. So this aid was passed the week of April 24th. Biden passed it, signed it after the Senate basically rubber stamped it. There was no opposition. There's not an anti-war soul in Washington at this moment. So it is going through. And as Scott said, it's going to take a while for these weapons to get there. Once they do, they're all going to be shot down. But this isn't just Scott's analysis. This isn't even just the Ukrainian side, how they feel about this. It is also the Biden administration itself. Okay, so here's Politico. This was reported directly after Congress, the House of Representatives, ratified this aid package. It says the Biden administration isn't fully convinced Ukraine can win even with its new aid. Biden administration officials and lawmakers say the $60 billion package means Ukraine walks away from the battlefield with its country fully restored. Or few Biden administration officials and lawmakers believe this. So, despite the time and political capital spent on $60 billion in aid for Ukraine, some Biden administration officials are skeptical it is enough for Ukraine to win its 2-year war with Russia. Battlefield dynamics have not shifted a lot in the last few months, and I'm going to show you that they're actually shifting in Russia's favor quite significantly, and that the mainstream media is now admitting this, but we'll get to that in a second. Battlefield dynamics haven't shifted a lot, they say, because Ukraine is low on weaponry and ammunition, while Congress was debating authorizing more aid, according to 3 U.S. officials, which all granted unanimity to detail sensitive internal thinking. This is a funny language, sensitive internal thinking. During that period, Ukraine struggled to maintain Eastern territory, though Russia didn't make significant gains either. Although you could say that taking Avdiivka was a pretty significant gain, given what we're going to find out in a bit, what the media is sounding the alarm about in a second. Russia maintains a manpower and weapons advantage, and it would take a lot to reverse months and years of territorial losses. U.S. officials also asked questions about Ukraine's own tactics and priorities, especially after Kiev's counteroffensive failed, sapping forces of material and morale. The immediate goal is to stop Ukrainian losses and help Ukraine regain momentum and turn the tide on the battlefield. After that, the goal is to help Ukraine begin to regain its territories, said one of the officials. Will they have what they need to win? Ultimately, yes, but it's not a guarantee that they will. Military operations are far more complicated than that. Capitol Hill lawmakers are expressing concerns as well about whether the U.S. provided weapons can lead to a Ukraine defeat of Russia, or if it's just enough to temporarily fend off the invasion. That's the question, said a Democratic Senate aide. This answer matters greatly. Winning against Russia means Ukraine will get most or all of its territory back. Not losing. So this is what I love. By contrast, signals Ukraine can hold its lines and advance some, but fail to claw back what Russia seized. So they're going to use this term a lot, not losing, okay? Not losing. That's kind of where the U.S. foreign policy establishment, the neocons, are at with this conflict. They are no longer talking about the possibility of winning in a unanimous sense, in a sense that it is guaranteed. They can't even fake the hubris anymore. They are essentially admitting that not losing is probably the best that they can get. Biden, upon signaling the aid package for Ukraine on Wednesday, stressed that Russia uses its military to target civilian infrastructure, although this is, of course, not proven. highlighting the need to boost Kiev's firepower. They've killed tens of thousands of Ukrainians, bombed hospitals, kindergartens. So this is, of course, not proven, especially given what is proven with U.S. support for Israel's onslaught on Gaza. There is no proof. There's a lot of proof that Ukraine has actually shelled and bombed civilian infrastructure for 8, 9, 10 years. There's not a lot of proof that Russia is doing the same. And I think the casualty counts of civilians comparatively to, let's say, what Israel has wrought on Gaza say a lot about how Russia has fought this war. So we can just move on from that. John Kirby hinted Tuesday that Ukraine still doesn't have a fully formed plan to defeat Russia, though the U.S. would be in talks to crystallize one. We'll be able to continue to have these conversations with the Ukrainians about what their long-term strategy is for pushing back Russia aggression and then tailoring future packages to those needs. Okay. So there's a lot of debate about what a winning endgame for Ukraine looks like at this point. The Biden administration laments that months of congressional deliberation deprived Ukraine of weaponry that it needed to push back Russia. It's certainly possible that Russia could make tactical gains in the coming weeks. It's going to take some time for us to dig out of a hole that was created by 6 months of delays. So not even the Biden administration believes that it can really turn the tide in this conflict. And this aid isn't really going to do that. And so that's just one report. And then NBC News, okay, the same day that this was passed in the House, reported this. They said, the race is on. Will the U.S. aid arrive in time for Ukraine's fight to hold off Russia's army? And we have an answer to that right after we go over this a bit. For many in Kiev, the news that the aid package had finally passed Congress offered relief and renewed hope for victory. But a long and difficult fight is still ahead. After months of political wrangling and battlefield reversals, Kiev has reason to cheer. Now the race is on to ensure that military aid by the United States gets to the front lines in time to make a difference to troops trying to ward off Russia's advancing army. For many in Ukraine, the news of the aid package offered relief and renewed hope of victory, with the war now being in its third year. But in the streets and trenches of Ukraine, those who spoke to NBC News espoused a view shared by many Western military analysts that much of the damage had already been done. And while important and welcome, $60 billion worth of supplies would only go so far. The aid is coming at a vital moment for the U.S. ally, which faces severe ammunition and personnel shortages that have left it in a desperate situation on the front lines for the last few months, said London-based think tanker Neil Melvin. Russia is gradually grinding down Ukrainian men and weapons. The U.S. supplies can slow this process and potentially blunt an expected Russia counteroffensive over the summer, but Ukraine will need much more if it is to defeat Russia and reclaim occupied territories. It will need much more. We're not going to read any more of that because that's all you need to know. They need much more. And there are many in Congress. Of course, this is still a very politicized issue. There are many in Congress, especially on the Republican side, which has to save face. They're saying, oh, well, we don't know if there's going to be any more from here. And it's not certain. This took 6 months to pass. Who knows when the next package is going to be pushed through? So if this package isn't going to do it, and it's going to take perhaps months and months and months for the next one, it's quite clear that all of these doubts should tell us that Ukraine is actually in huge trouble on the battlefield, that it is not in a situation where simply throwing money at it, simply throwing weapons at Ukraine will change circumstances. Russia is really in the driver's seat now. And this isn't just me talking. I'm not just making this up. This actually is what CNN is saying. Here's what CNN had to say. Russia is making daily tactical gains. So what did Jake Sullivan say? He said that we can expect Russia to make tactical gains over the course of this aid package as it is being deliberated, used up, as the production starts getting into motion. Remember, a lot of this is going to military contractors. Who knows how many weapons are actually going to be produced by them, whether it will be effective, but they're going to be getting many of these contracts. In any event, Russia is making daily tactical gains in eastern Ukraine as concerns swirl around Ukrainian military reporting. So here we go. CNN says that Vladimir Putin's forces have made greater gains in the last 3 in at least 3 locations along the eastern front in Ukraine, including for the first time in several months an advance in the northern Kharkov region, highlighting again Kiev's need for ammunition and weapons from the United States and its allies. Russia's tactical advances are now daily and reflect a new tempo on the battlefield since the fall of Avdiivka in February. The gains are generally modest, from a few hundred meters of territory to perhaps a kilometer at most, but they are usually taking place in several locations at once. So what does that tell you? All along that front line. Meanwhile, Ukraine's losses are being accompanied by criticism from influential military bloggers and analysts of the armed forces' official battlefield updates. One of Russia's main efforts is in the Donetsk region, unsurprisingly. Ukraine's deep state monitoring group, which updates daily changes in frontline positions, shows Russia forces pushing forward in 8 different locations along 20 to 25 kilometers of front line in one-day period. Military bloggers on both sides have reported that Russian forces have crossed a water course and taken control of settlements in Semenvika and Berdichi, which Ukrainian Army Chief Alexander Syrskyi confirmed in a post on Telegram Sunday. Russia had deployed up to 4 brigades and offensive operations in that area, said Syrskyi. The withdrawal in the Donetsk operational zone continues, says Ukrainian blogger Mearsheimer. So there you have it. I mean, this is the situation on the battlefield. It's not good for Ukraine. It is one of retreat, of withdrawal, and while it is gradual, Russia is certainly not throwing everything it has at the front line. Nonetheless, the reality is that Ukraine is being pushed back, and it's only April, right? Because I'm going to get into Russia's plans in a second, or at least what is being reported. I don't have verification, but this is what is being reported. Slightly further south, Russian forces are making headway in the industrial town of Krasnoyarivka, entering from the south and the east. Fierce fighting had been reported around the town's large brick factory. One Russian military blogger wrote of the battle's importance. The liberation of the refractory plant would actually mean the fall of Krasnoyarivka fortification, as the northern outskirts of the settlement are private buildings, which will be too difficult to defend if the plant is lost. Elsewhere, about 180 kilometers or 112 miles to the north, Russia has also achieved their first successes in almost 3 months along that part of the front line that cuts into the Kharkov region. A Ukrainian army spokesman described Russian forces there as having become significantly more active over the past day, while Deep State assessed a Russian advance of between 1 and 2 kilometers into the village of Kilsivka. Overall, the front lines in this region have been among the most stable since Ukraine recaptured a large swath of territory in the Kharkov region in 2022. So there you have it. CNN reporting that all across the front line, there is pushback. Russia is making the gains. So what do we have here? We have the fact that this aid is not going to be a game changer, because there isn't really a Biden administration official. There isn't anyone in Ukraine's military side. There really isn't anyone saying that this aid can essentially turn the tide on the battlefield. And what does this mean? So there's reports, and I can't say whether these reports are verified or not, but I've been seeing them on Telegram. I've been seeing them on social media, that Russia at this point is looking at a full sort of victory in Donbass. That Donbass will collapse. The Ukrainian side will collapse by October if all things remain the same. Now, the aid situation could very well delay that prospect, but it's quite clear from what CNN is reporting, what this aid package has in it, as well as how the United States is reacting to it, that everyone involved to some degree, whether they try to deny it or delay their perhaps admissions or whatever it is, believe that, in fact, the trajectory of this conflict is moving in this direction anyway, that that the date may not be so significant. And of course, in this conflict, there have been a lot of predictions made over the course of it, which aren't always so accurate. But nonetheless, it's hard to do. We cannot know exactly what Russia's thinking. Only Russia knows what Russia's thinking, and Russia is very good at ensuring that they do not telegraph anything that they do. So all of this is to say, though, is that the battlefield situation, the situation on the ground for Ukraine, is leading to the scenario of full-blown collapse, possibly by this October. And what is October as well? It's the BRICS summit. So what a massive victory for BRICS it would be if this conflict were to, I'm not saying it's going to end in October, but if the primary sort of modus operandi, the location, the flashpoint for this NATO war on Russia were to collapse then. I mean, I think it would be quite fitting. So we're going to have to wait and see, because we don't know exactly how this will be used. We hear Patriot missiles are now being sent to Ukraine. We know that a lot of these infantry vehicles are already sent to Ukraine. All of these things will burn. Russia is going to destroy them. But of course, this takes more time. This takes energy. This takes resources. And so it's unclear what Ukraine will be able to mount. But we do have indications, given Russia's activity on the front line, that they are mounting, if not a red arrow offensive, a stronger push on that front line that could very well lead to major changes on the battlefield in the months to come, leading to some reports that October, maybe the date, October 2024, when Donbass is potentially fully liberated, or at least liberated to the point where Project Ukraine, NATO's objective in Ukraine, has completely collapsed and burst asunder. So we're going to see, but that's the direction that this is going in. The Ukraine aid package, well, taking up headlines, taking up space. We hear about it all the time. We hear about, we need these weapons, we need this ammunition. This ammunition's got to get to Ukraine. Then things will get better. Well, too little, too late. All right, everybody. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. We are going to move on to the next story. Hit that like button as you come into the stream. Thanks so much for everyone who's here. Okay, hit that like button, hit that notifications bell, that subscribe button. And we are going to now move on to what I think is a very, a story to me that's both important, but also just so emblematic of where we are. Okay. So let's have at it. I try not to watch Piers Morgan, the infamous UK based commentator who has made essentially a living promoting a kind of liberal justification for the US and UK and essentially the collective West's imperial regime. And this has not been any more clear or stark, and perhaps just absolutely grotesquely so, than in Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza. He has made a name in low key. British Iraqi rapper has been on this program more than a few times talking about how Piers Morgan has pretty deep connections to the Israeli side. But nonetheless, he has played this role of being kind of a middleman, someone who poses as a good-hearted fellow that just continuously rebrands Israel, the United States, and the UK's talking points to justify this ongoing catastrophe in Gaza, as well as its regional implications. Well, Piers Morgan has, of course, interviewed people like Norman Finkelstein and hosted debates, including people like Norman Finkelstein, the infamous professor, former professor who is an expert on the situation in Gaza. And it hasn't gone so well for Piers Morgan. Well, he met his match, and incredibly so, from political scientist, the renowned political scientist John Mearsheimer. And John Mearsheimer came on the Piers Morgan show and absolutely destroyed anything and everything that Piers Morgan tried to throw at him. And I wanted to cover this because we are hearing a narrative of late, both in regards to Israel, what it's doing in Gaza, as well as what the United States, Israel, and of course the collective West are doing in the Middle East to Iran, for example. A narrative that says that the United States and the West and Israel all have a duty, even if it's not correct how they go about this duty, but they have a duty to ensure that future war crimes, that future catastrophes, that future disasters in the region are prevented from these evil, barbaric forces, whether it be Hamas or Iran, etc. And I want to play you how John Mearsheimer answered this because I thought it was an absolutely brilliant segment. And I have more than a few of these. So let me pull up the first. Okay. So let's see if I got this right one here. Here we go. Yes. So here's what he had to say when Piers Morgan, and this is from Fukan Gozakara, who says Piers Morgan tried to justify what Israel is doing by saying, how does any country defend itself without committing war crimes? And so here's what John Mearsheimer had to say. This is what we hear a lot in the narrative of the collective West, of the neocons, right? That unless you commit war crimes, unless you meet so-called force with force, and I think even that's a simple oversimplification when it comes to what's going on in Gaza, you have to respond with equal, if not greater force, because that is for the greater good. So here's how John Mearsheimer answered that.
That's us off the hook.
How does any country defend itself from an existential threat like the Nazis, then by your categorization, without committing war crimes?
Well, if you look at how the Soviets, who were basically responsible for defeating the Nazis in World War II, they did not commit many war crimes in the process of defeating the Wehrmacht. It was basically a ground war where the Soviets, the Red Army, rolled up the Wehrmacht. There were no bombing of cities. There were no dropping of nuclear weapons.
So, in a sense, what John Mearsheimer is saying and responding to, because they've been talking about Israel, okay? They've been talking about what Israel is doing. And of course, Piers Morgan does that. I'm not for all of these killings of children, but war crimes are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen in response to October 7th. This has been Piers Morgan's justification for Israel from the very beginning. And John Mearsheimer right away pulls out a deep historical example and says the Soviet Union did not drop bombs on civilians to defeat Nazis. They did not do that. They did not drop bombs on civilians. What they did is they fought a ground war directly against Nazi forces and defeated them at the great cost of the Soviets, so of the Red Army. So let's continue.
Now, there's no question that there was a lot of rape and pillaging, especially at the end, as the Red Army moved into Germany. But aside from that, this was not a purposeful campaign to murder huge numbers of civilians. So you can fight a war on the ground involving two armies that basically avoids the problem of bombing cities and murdering huge numbers of civilians.
What if the Nazis are bombing cities, as they were?
What do you mean? I'm not defending that.
Like the Battle of Britain, the Blitz. I mean, if they're going to send over bombers and just attack cities in the way that they did, how do you defend yourself without committing war crimes by your assessment?
Well, the British defended themselves with fighter aircraft. The RAF
fended off the Luftwaffe and won the Battle of Britain. The RAF, the British, did not commit war crimes to defeat the Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain. There's no question that the RAF, at different points in the war, purposely targeted German cities and purposely tried to murder large numbers of British civilians. You know the story of Bomber Harris for sure.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened in the Battle of Britain. And my only point is, if you talk about what Bomber Harris did and the RAF did against German cities, this was a war crime. They were purposely bombing working class areas in German cities.
A big one was Dresden. I mean, firebombing tens of thousands in the Royal Air Force, the RAF, as Mearsheimer is calling it, was absolutely was the biggest part to that. The United States helped out, but the British Air Force just absolutely leveled Dresden, killed tens of thousands.
Because that they believed that strategy would maximize the number of civilians.
Well, they wasn't as simple as that, were they? Because they were deliberately targeting industrial cities in the main, which were being used to build munitions as well. So there was a legitimate reason to target these cities. But that was the case in many cases.
That's not true.
Yes, it is.
No, I mean, what happened was that the British quickly found out, and this is what happened to us when we bombed Japan. We quickly found out that bombing economic and military targets didn't work. I could walk you through the story about the bombing of Japanese cities like Tokyo. It didn't work. And the reason we turned to bombing civilians, to killing civilians when we bombed Japan, and this was true with regard to Bomber Harris, is that bombing economic targets didn't.
So that's one part of this, okay? And I thought it was brilliant to bring up the Soviet example, because it is so true that the Soviets gave up basically everything to fight that kind of war. And it cost tens of millions. 27 million Soviets died, but it did lead to a reduction. It wasn't the Soviets going in and just dropping bombs like Israel is doing on Gaza right now. So that is just no justification, and that is the narrative we keep hearing over and over and over again. So I want to play another. This might overlap because the segments were kind of hard to organize, but let me play you another segment here. All right. So here is more. Okay. No, let's not do this. Okay. Let's go to the Iran piece. So I think we got enough of Mearsheimer just absolutely blowing the lid off of how there's no justifications. What Piers Morgan was basically saying there is that you have to do what Nazis do in order to defeat Nazis. That is essentially the argument. So that's basically saying the Soviets, the United States, the Bercy allies in World War II, that's what they did. Not so simple. Although the US, of course, committed grave war crimes in Japan, for example. But now we're going to get in the issue of Iran, because, of course, Piers Morgan takes a very hard stance on Iran and has been using Iran as a way to justify, of course, once again, what Israel is doing by putting a liberal face on it. And here is what John Mearsheimer had to say about the situation there. So here we go.
Israelis who started this by bombing the Iranian embassy in Damascus. The Iranians did not start this conflict that recently took place between April 1st and April 19th.
But they were there with people from Hezbollah, weren't they? So they were military leaders using the consulate to plan attacks on Israel with leaders of Hezbollah. I mean, that was why they were targeted.
Look, in international law and according to international norms, states don't attack the embassies of other states. This was considered to be a significant provocation.
Unless they're being used as military bases.
No, Piers Morgan keeps on doing this. This has been the narrative too from the collective West, from the foreign policy neocon establishment. What they say is that, of course, embassies are protected property. that under international law, there's to be no striking embassies during open conflicts, any kind of conflict, except Piers Morgan and others will say, the apologists of war, essentially world war, these apologists, they'll say, except for if there's military planning. No, actually, it doesn't matter if there's military planning, if there's anything going on there, they're still protected. Every single U.S. embassy on this planet, every single one, is used for military purposes. There is not a U.S. embassy on this planet that isn't used for military purposes. And why is that? Because the United States doesn't do diplomacy. U.S. embassies in Colombia, all across Latin America, are used for military and intelligence purposes, all across the Middle East, all across West Asia. Try to go to a U.S. embassy in Saudi Arabia and tell me that there isn't military activity going on there. Go to a U.S. embassy in Israel and tell me that military activity isn't going on there. It's preposterous. It happens all the time. There have been literal coups and regime change operations that have been planned out of U.S. embassies. This was the case especially during dirty wars in Latin America and the Caribbean throughout the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Ask Chile what role the U.S. embassy played in the overthrow of Salvador Allende, which installed Pinochet, the fascist dictator. I think Chileans would say, well, the U.S. embassy played a very nefarious role by essentially acting as a conduit for arms, training, intelligence. It happens. Operation Phoenix came out of so-called Indochina U.S. embassies in Vietnam and Cambodia. This is a long history. But here's Piers Morgan saying, oh, you can just bomb them. You can just bomb the U.S., Israel. They can just bomb embassies whenever they feel like there's military activity happening within them. Anyway, here's Mearsheimer to continue.
Which it is believed, certainly Israel argues, I don't know, but it's certainly been argued by Israel that it was being used, part of this consular area was being used as a genuine military base, in which case it becomes a legitimate target if indeed they are meeting with Hezbollah to plan attacks on Israel, isn't it?
There's no evidence that it was being used as a military base. And the fact is that if the Israelis are going to hit the Iranian embassy, the end result is the Iranians are going to retaliate. And they did retaliate. Now, I want to say a few words about that retaliation. It's very important to understand that the Americans and the Iranians orchestrated the Iranian attack so that it would be a limited attack. It would do very little damage to Israel. And the reason this is the case is that neither the Iranians or the United States wanted this conflict. And it was the Israelis who, by attacking the Iranian embassy in Damascus, dragged the Americans and the Iranians into this conflict. And what we tried to do, working with the Iranians before the attack on April 14th and during the attack on April 14th, was to do everything possible to keep it limited and avoid escalation.
So, I mean, John Mearsheimer just speaking the truth. I mean, John Mearsheimer, especially since the conflict in Ukraine jumped off, but but even more so since Israel launched its genocidal onslaught. You follow him on Judge Knapp's show and wherever else he's doing interviews. I've tried to get him on here, but very busy guy. But nonetheless, if you follow his work and his interviews, it's just become more and more solid on these issues. And when it comes to Iran, this is exactly right. This was a limited strike that Iran conducted on Israel that did penetrate the dome. It did cause damage to military installations inside of Israel, no matter how many times they try to say it didn't. But the United States and Israel were in deep communication through mediators, and they essentially agreed to a limited attack that wouldn't escalate the situation in the region and that would give Iran what it wanted, deterrence, and also give the United States a way out of further becoming beleaguered in some kind of quagmire that it already really is in. So this was the reality. that Iran, throughout this iteration of U.S. and Israeli aggression, it has been the one to behave sanely and rationally with both reality and humanity and the region and Palestine all on its mind. Meanwhile, you have Piers Morgan trying to say, without any evidence, that Iran was planning military operations out of this embassy. And let's be real, of course, there was Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Of course, there were several military advisors, some of Iran's top commanders inside of the Al-Quds force, which is essentially the regional wide force which fights on behalf of the Palestinian people, as well as whichever part of this region is under siege from aggression, especially foreign aggression. It played a key role, of course, in the fight against ISIS and these jihadist groups, etc. So you could say, because they were there, that military activity was being planned. But there's no proof. And even if there was proof, it would still be a war crime. And it would still justify and warrant an Iranian response. So whoever demonizes Piers Morgan, people like Piers Morgan, when they demonize Iran for taking a rightful response to a war crime against it, one that was limited and one that essentially, in many respects, helped take the planet off the brink of a potential nuclear and regional disaster. For those like Piers Morgan who stir up the pot and try to demonize Iran, all they are doing is creating further conditions for something like this to happen again, for Israel to essentially have carte blanche, rubber stamp permission to commit war crimes of this nature, which takes us to the brink of a world war in West Asia, or at least a world war that has a focal point in West Asia. So that's the reality. But John Mearsheimer just absolutely was incredible in outlining these points to Piers Morgan, and just, I mean, this is just how it is for Piers Morgan, right? Just completely outclassed. There's just no, how should I say, no question about where Piers Morgan stands. There's no question about John Mearsheimer's intelligence on these matters. But I did have one more clip on this that I wanted to show, but it does overlap with one of the last ones, so I want to just fast forward through it. Here we go. Here we go. All right. So we're going to listen to one more clip from John Mearsheimer on this question, okay? So I just had to fast forward a little bit. Okay, it's not working for some reason. All right, let me refresh. Here we go.
If you categorize all civilians,
Here we go. So we're going to get more into this question. So this can include what Israel did to Iran, right? And this can also include what Israel is doing to Gaza, because they're having this conversation about the broader situation. So here we go.
If you categorize all civilian deaths in a war like that as murder, you're effectively saying that every one of those deaths is a crime. I would not argue that what the Allies did in response to what the Nazis and the Japanese were doing was a crime necessarily. They were responding to an existential threat to the world, including mass murder of civilians, as we saw with the Holocaust. So a response is not necessarily murder, is it? It's effectively self-defense.
The question you have to ask yourself is whether or not you think, because the Nazis were committing genocide, because the Nazis were committing mass murder in Europe, that justifies bombing German cities and purposely killing huge numbers of civilians. Do you think that lets you off the hook? That's the argument you're making. You're saying that because the Germans were so horrible, we were allowed to be horrible ourselves, but we weren't as horrible as the Germans. And furthermore, we were doing this in self-defense. That's the argument you're making.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, I understand that there are strategic imperatives for killing civilians, right? This is why we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki with nuclear weapons. We thought that it made good strategic sense and that it would save American lives, especially those GIs who would have to invade the Japanese home islands. But I still think that that is a case of war crimes. And I think that to use your rhetoric lets us off the hook.
How does any country defend itself from an existential threat like the Nazis, then by your categorization, without committing war crimes?
Well, if you look at how the Soviets, who
All right, so that we already went through that part, but I think he did a masterful job of going over this point about how war crimes are war crimes and that there really is no justification for it. In World War II, history is so important because one thing that's often not noted about World War II and about the US's behavior is that when those nuclear warheads, when those bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it was already well known that Japan was gearing up to surrender, that the firebombing that the United States had already partaken in had crushed them, and that the Soviets, right, in the Manchuria region, for example, were marching. And the reason why the United States dropped those bombs because it did not want to give the Soviet Union credit for helping to end this war, but also wanted to send a message to the Soviet Union that the next phase of its empire was coming into fruition, which was the Cold War, that this was a message to the Soviet Union that the Soviet Union shouldn't get too comfortable being on the same side of the United States because that was going to be reversed very soon. That is the reason why the United States dropped those bombs. It was not to defeat Japan. Japan was defeated. Foreign Policy magazine of all places, look it up. They have discussed this. They have the receipts. This was the real aim. And all of this is to say is that war crimes are war crimes. And Israel always gets a pass, and the United States always gets a pass from people like Piers Morgan. There's always a justification. We have to defend democracy. We have to beat the Nazis. But that is never the case. The United States does not defeat Nazis. The United States helps strengthen their hand in places like Ukraine. The United States doesn't defend or promote democracy. It completely obliterates it in coup after coup and war after war all over the world. Is the United States truly bringing democracy anywhere right now? Is it bringing democracy to Gaza? Gaza right now is not just an open air prison. It is an open air prison that's being bombed to oblivion, where people are being massacred on a scale that we have not seen, right? That we have not seen in the modern era. If we look at it from at least from the arena of proportionality, like the proportion of people that are being killed in Gaza is just astronomical. And it's just so infuriating. It's so infuriating that people like Piers Morgan get this kind of morality pass that they, because they are giving some kind of liberal argument, they're against war crimes in general. They don't like what Israel is doing in some respects. And then they go up and I think it's kind of insulting. Speak to someone like John Mearsheimer, a political scientist of many decades, someone who's written dozens and dozens and dozens of books and articles, a real researcher, someone who's written about the Israel lobby in the United States. This is someone who knows his stuff. And you try to debate and argue with him about whether it's justifiable to commit war crimes. That's not even intellectually a valuable conversation. Because all you have to do is look at the UN Charter. All you have to do is look at international law, and you can see that there is absolutely no justification for any war crimes. Because, for example, if you look at, let's say, the right to armed resistance for occupied people, which is in the UN Charter, that resistance is not a war crime. That resistance is actually self-defense. War crimes are offensive operations, usually take part that are the result of brutal force from a more powerful aggressor. That's generally how it goes. Wars are never fought. Have we ever fought? Has there ever been a war fought in history where both sides are equally as aggressive, where they're equally at can be said to have started this war? No. Usually wars are about one side trying to assert its interests over another. That's why you could say war in many respects is a reflection of class war, because geopolitics is basically an essentially class war among nations. It's about the bigger nations, the richer nations, the wealthier nations, those nations that are seeking unmitigated free access to profit accumulation, monopolization, economic expansion, and those who are not. That in many respects, that's how geopolitics is shaping out. China, Russia, Iran, these countries, they're not seeking unlimited expansion, because if they were, they would have expanded far beyond where they are now in terms of their national interests. The United States, though, the collective West, they're everywhere. They're in the Solomon Islands, of all places. They're everywhere. They are seeking to expand their economic hegemony at the expense of those nations. That is the nature of war. Israel, it's not fighting an equal party in Gaza. Hamas, as many people say, it doesn't have. Hamas and the Palestinian resistance, they don't have the same kind of weaponry. They don't even have a state. However, as has been the case in history, many nations that have been stateless, that have been essentially colonized, dispossessed, they have fought wars too. And they have committed acts that we would say, well, that may be morally repugnant, but it's not a war crime because it's resistance to occupation, to dispossession. This is the qualitative difference between empire and those who are besieged by empire. That is something that John Mearsheimer understands, and his attempt to articulate this to Piers Morgan was probably fell on lost ears or on deaf ears, but it didn't fall. But many people listened to it, and many people could see that Piers Morgan was just completely out of his league. So all in all, we have to combat and push against this narrative that Iran, that Hamas, that the Palestinian resistance are these kind of boogeymen in the region that are trying to destroy democracy so the United States and Israel can just do what they want in a way that's just more palatable. That's what Piers Morgan is trying to say. The United States and Israel should wage war on these forces. It just shouldn't do it in the way that it is doing it. This is why they're scapegoating Netanyahu. This is why they want Israel's government to change. It's not to stop the destruction of Gaza. It's not to stop the horrific war crimes that they're committing. It's just to take people's attention away from it, take people's eyes off of it all around the world, and make it more acceptable to the global population. I think that ship has sailed, but the project, the mission of the U.S. empire, of the collective West, is ongoing, and Piers Morgan is the media talking head of that mission, the public relations person of that mission. So we have one more story to go, and then I do hope to talk about a little bit about my trip that I was on in China. So the next story will actually be about China. Keep hitting that like button, everyone. Keep hitting that notifications bell. It's very much appreciated. Okay. And hit the subscribe button, notifications bell, and please support in the video description on Patreon, Substack annually. You can be a YouTube member monthly. I'll definitely shout out people who have given support by super chat and membership and all of that at the end. But we have one more story here. So let me just start to pull it up. Okay. Give me a second. This one's actually funny. This one's a good one. We're going to continue on. I talked with Mark Sloboda about this a bit, but there have been more developments that they make me chuckle, honestly, China's doing just fine, everybody. Let me just open with that. China's doing just fine. Actually, I would say that China is in such a good position that the idea that China is somehow collapsing or it's in economic crisis or anything like that is it's beyond laughable. Here we go. I have all these. I'm going to show you how fine China is, especially on the world stage. Okay. Especially on the world stage, because this is what this is really all about here. Okay. So give me a more second. I just want to pull up all the stories before I actually get to it. All right. Yeah, this is good. Okay. Here we go. Let's get to it. Keep hitting that like button. Keep hitting that notifications bell, subscribe button. Go to the video description to support. We're going to talk about China now. China. And then I have announcements and all those things. Okay. Here we go. Antony Blinken ended the month of April in China. He flew to Shanghai, talked to party leaders in Shanghai. He also was able to meet with Wang Yi and Xi Jinping. That was not for certain, but he did do it. And this visit did not start off so well. So the US-China relationship is, of course, not in the best place. The possibility of war between the US and China has never been graver. This has been covered repeatedly on this channel. And of course, this channel doesn't hold any punches and talks and speaks about this like it is. And the evidence shows that the United States is the one that is, despite all of the rhetoric of China being the aggressor, freedom of navigation, all of this in the South China Sea, etc., it's quite clear that the United States is the one that is provoking war. Well, Antony Blinken's visit was no different. Okay, Antony Blinken made several threats on this trip to China. He threatened China with sanctions over its so-called overcapacity, and he threatened China with more sanctions over its supposed support for Russia. Okay, so here's Voice of America just briefly saying what Blinken did. He warned China over support of Russia's war efforts. So he met with Xi Jinping on April 26th, and then right afterwards said there's serious concern about China's support for Russia's defense industry. So this was shortly after he met with Chinese President Xi Jinping. He said, "I told Xi if China doesn't address this problem, we will." So wonderful, right? You're just issuing threats right after you meet with the top official, the president of China, your counterpart, the second biggest economy in the world. You're supposed to be doing diplomacy, but all you're doing is issuing threats. Well, China was very well aware of Antony Blinken's posture, and of course has been very well aware of the United States' hostility. So this has had a significant effect, not just on the relations between the United States and China in very concrete ways. It's also led to pretty humiliating moments. And I believe Blinken was just humiliated, as generally is the case for Antony Blinken when he's trying to do his job. It generally ends in or begins and ends with humiliation. But here is Antony Blinken getting off the plane. This is how China greeted him. Wasn't very warm. Here we go. So, no red carpets, no top officials. These are basically just the Shanghai leaders who are meeting with him. And of course, there's Nick Burns, the so called ambassador to China. So, that is how he was greeted. There wasn't a parade like when Bashar al Assad and Nicolas Maduro were there. Nothing of the sorts. And I would love to see in May, and we're going to cover it, when Vladimir Putin goes to China, how Putin will be received. I'm sure it will be far different. But this wasn't all. Not only did Antony Blinken not get red carpet treatment, but here is Xi Jinping caught on camera on C-SPAN, where there was a translation of Xi Jinping's comments as he's waiting for to meet with Antony Blinken. Here we go. Oh, okay. So I guess there's no. I thought there was a transcript, but anyway, Carl Jha translates it for us. He says Xi Jinping meets Blinken. Xi to his aide. When is he leaving? Hey, tonight. Xi good. Xi's body language. Okay, let's get it over with. So that was the feeling. That was the feeling for Xi Jinping for China meeting with Blinken. Not a lot of excitement. So what you had was Antony Blinken going to China, making more threats. Overcapacity. China has to address its economy. It's unfair. We're going to level sanctions. There's talks about leveling sanctions on Chinese banks. No addressing, of course, of the U.S. military's posture and threats, especially in Taiwan, the Philippines. None of that. Of course, the United States right off its typical "we are for the one China" policy, while in action violating it every single day, and of course moving more and more of its military hardware and brass to the Asia Pacific. But nonetheless, it gets even worse than this, okay? Because now they're talking about sanctioning Chinese banks, and this comes out of this visit. So this visit was supposed to be, and China is still talking about it like this. They're talking about it as a visit that is positive for relations, that it's going to help stabilize the situation. But the Chinese readout from the foreign ministry in China said something very important, okay? It said something very important about Blinken's visit. Here is what it had to say, and I just want to pull it up really quickly before I get into why China doesn't feel like it needs to be so concerned about what the United States thinks of it anymore. So here is Secretary of the readout, okay? And I want to just highlight this portion. This is the second sentence. China and the United States should be partners rather than rivals. Help each other succeed rather than hurt each other. Seek common ground and reserve differences rather than engage in vicious competition. And honor words with actions rather than saying one thing but doing another. So to me, that's the key statement in this readout, that China is sending the message that the United States should not be saying one thing and doing another, because that is exactly the message that was sent to Antony Blinken during that meeting, that the United States needs to correct its counterproductive policy towards China. Stop saying one thing and doing another. Stop saying you're from the one China principle, then arming Taiwan in this new aid package. Stop saying that you respect China's sovereignty and then support every single astroturfed regime change movement outside of China's borders. Stop saying that you're for the free market and for free competition and competition economically, and that you want to cooperate on the important economic relationship, while also instituting sanctions, blacklisting tech companies, and of course now even adding and escalating to that potential list of sanctions on China. Xi Jinping said, stop, this is just hypocrisy. And so Antony Blinken's visit was incredibly humiliating, but one thing is for certain: China is doing just fine. So, of course, the economic numbers have been completely demonized by the Western media. China grew over 5%, about 5.2, 5.3% in 2023. It's estimated to grow about that same mark in 2024. But what they purposely downplayed was a few things. Number one, China's tech sector, renewable energy sector, these things that the United States is complaining about having overcapacity and flooding the world market are actually responsible for high levels of China's growth, meaning that China is investing in high tech, investing in renewables, investing in new kinds of development, and it's growing exponentially. The high tech sector over 10%, for example. But this is just part of this. And of course, we can get into all the economic conversations and debates about economy and political economy. But what is very clear on the diplomatic and geopolitical side of things is that China does not feel like it has to bow down to the United States anymore. And I want to tell you a huge reason why this is. It's because the rest of the world supports China. This may blow the mind of the average Westerner who has been told that China is a pariah, China is authoritarian, it's undemocratic, that China oppresses its own people, and all of this stuff that we hear within the Cold War-addled minds of in the West. But the fact of the matter is we can go down the line. It's not just Chinese people, because I've shown reports from the Harvard Kennedy School, for example, that show that, of course, Chinese people in the upwards of 95% plus have trust in their government and approve of what the job their government is doing. But it's not just Chinese people. It's the whole world. The whole world. Here's Al Mayadeen reporting. April 26, 2024, the U.S. approval rating in Africa plummets as Russia and China rise. Chinese and Russian foreign policies in Africa have made them more favorable to soft powers across the continent, more favorable soft powers across the continent as opposed to the U.S. So a Gallup poll showed that the United States is slipping as the world's most influential soft power country. Polling examined the global approval of U.S., China, Russia, and Germany. Out of all powers, only the U.S. saw a decline in approval in Africa from 59 to 56%, giving up its seat to China, which its approval went up from 52 to 58%. Last year, China's approval soared in 7 African countries by double-digit percentages for the first time in decades. Ghana, a 15% increase was recorded in Cote d'Ivoire, and Senegal, 14% increase was witnessed. It's worth noting, China in 2022 was Africa's largest bilateral trading partner of $288 billion in trade volume with African nations. So, there you go. That's Africa. That's just one continent, an important one of the richest in the world. Okay, one of the most important in the world in terms of the future of this planet. But it doesn't even stop there. Okay, Southeast Asia. This is where the United States is focusing its attention when it comes to encircling China and trying to contain it. But here you have in Southeast Asia, the majority of Southeast Asian nations would choose China over the U.S., says a survey by a Singapore-based think tank. More than half of people in Southeast Asia would side with China over the United States if forced to choose, a survey found. In the State of Southeast Asia Survey 2024 released this week, 50.5% of respondents said they favor China, up more than 11 percentage points compared to the year before. This is from an annual survey by Singapore-based ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute, and it's the first to show China being preferred over the U.S. Last year, only 38.9% of respondents preferred China and 61.1% preferred the U.S. China was also chosen as the most influential economic power in the region by most respondents, 59.9% of respondents picking it over the United States. Okay? So, of course, it says there's distrust in Beijing, 67.5% saying they distrust that, and there are probably many reasons for that. But nonetheless, the fact that even if there's distrust, that they still choose China over the United States, I think only bolsters China's case even more. So an older survey too, from earlier in 2023, talked about the Arab world, talked about West Asia. China surpasses U.S. in popularity among Arab youth as Beijing expands its footprint in the Middle East. More young Arabs see China as an ally of their countries than the U.S., a survey of regional youth found. The U.S. ranks 7th among nations considered as friendly compared to China, which ranked 2nd in the Arab Youth Survey. The findings show that support for China has gradually risen over the years as Beijing expands its footprint. But they also reveal that as much as Arabs want the U.S. to play a smaller role in the Middle East, many believe the superpower will continue to be an influential actor. Well, why do you think that is? Probably because the United States is not going to give up its constant warmongering in the region. I think that's probably why most people think the United States is here to stay. It's only been 40 plus years, when more than that. Of course, if we look at, for example, the formation of Saudi Arabia, which the U.S. and Jordan, these countries, the U.S. had a huge hand in that. But if we just look at the last 40 plus years since the 79 intervention in Afghanistan, the United States has had a footprint ever since. 80% of respondents consider China to be an ally of their country, while 72% found the U.S. to be one. So there you go. Arab youth, young Arab folks, people in the region find China to be preferable. They find China to be a much more popular option when it comes to relating to countries around the world. So that's a big deal. China is doing just fine. Okay. This is, they'll never tell you this. Okay. They'll never tell you that China is actually not in crisis. When I was in China and I just got back, you won't get the sense that there's a crisis. People will talk about the economy being slower. That is true. There are external problems in the world. That's where most of it is attributed to. They will talk about a bit of an economic slowdown, but it's not slow everywhere. China has been very smart in redirecting its production, its investment into areas that are important for China. So no matter what happens in the world economic situation, China, for example, is going to produce so many electric vehicles that it is essentially 100% of the market almost at this point, and it has surpassed Japan as an overall car manufacturer in total renewable and non-renewable energy vehicles. I mean, that's incredible, and that has happened amid a world economic slowdown. So China is doing fine economically. We shouldn't even have to talk about that, but it's doing even better diplomatically. China not only brokered that historic Iran-Saudi Arabia normalization process, but China has played a key role in using the United Nations, using its platform to advocate for a Palestinian state. It has played a key role in showing what it looks like to both not be a party to a conflict like what's going on in Ukraine, but taking a principled stand in supporting Russia and supporting the multipolar world in rejecting sanctions and rejecting proxy wars. China has done an incredible job in that, and it has to be given credit, because without China, where would Russia be all by itself, right? If it wasn't for China's willingness to maintain a relationship. You remember February 2022, I think it was February 8th, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping talked at the Winter Olympics. And after that talk, Russia released a huge report about the Russia-China relationship. And when you read it off of the Russian government, the Russian government website, what you will find is that this report is actually an assertion that China and Russia walk together no matter what happens. And then the special military operation launched. And where has China been but by Russia's side in the most important ways? Some people wish that China would go in and help Russia even more so that the conflict would end faster. But did anyone ask if Russia wants that? I don't think so. Because Russia and China are not just about being big and being strong, right? And destroying others and making sure it gets what they want. No, they're looking at the whole world situation. They're looking at what's best for Russia, what's best for China, and what's best for the world. How do we maintain stability? How do we maintain a semblance of that so that their actions, which they believe are just, actually lead to the results that they want? That is how they've been operating. So China is doing just fine diplomatically. It is not just a rising power, but the global south looks at China. First of all, China's in the global south, but the global south looks at China as a fraternal ally, not just a big power that's an alternative to the United States. No, a fraternal ally. That's why, okay, take a look at this. That's why, and I want to show you this. A friend of the show, Pepe Escobar, he is frequently on, okay? So here's what he posted. It's very funny, actually. Pepe Escobar, friend of the show, posted this. That's why people like Bashar al-Assad get parties like this when they come to China, and Antony Blinken gets treated like this. And coming to China, Assad versus Little Blinky, said Pepe Escobar. But there's Bashar al-Assad and his wife, and there is Antony Blinken below. And the difference couldn't be any more stark. Why does China do this? Is it just to show up the United States, show up the collective West, to show that China knows where its friends are? That's part of it. But it's also a message that I believe has a lot of meaning, that countries like Syria, countries like Venezuela, which is now an all-weather partnership, countries like Iran, which has a massive strategic partnership with China, countries like Russia, of course, which has if not the biggest strategic partnership with China, but also the most important, no matter what the dollar amount is. Countries like this share an identity with China. That's why it's so important that China sends this kind of message. It's not just to, spit in the face of the collective West. It's also to show that China stands for things. And it's not just me who says this. It's not just me that says this. Foreign Affairs, okay? You might know Foreign Affairs. Foreign Affairs magazine is a mouthpiece of the neocons. It is literally probably one of the most heralded of these propaganda neocon media outlets. It's connected to the Council on Foreign Relations, which is a conduit of the neocons and, of course, of the bankers and the corporate elites that, of course, pay and line their pockets. So this is what they had to say. This is from Elizabeth Economy. Great name. China's alternative order. What should America learn from it? What America should learn from it. So I'm just going to read excerpts from this, okay? So it says, by now, Chinese President Xi Jinping's ambition to remake the world order is undeniable. He wants to dissolve Washington's network of alliances and purge what he dismisses as quote-unquote Western values from international bodies. He wants to knock the dollar off its pedestal and eliminate Washington's chokehold over critical technology. In his new multipolar world, global institutions and norms will be underpinned by Chinese notions of common security, economic development, Chinese values of state-determined political rights, and Chinese technology. China will no longer have to fight for leadership. Its centrality is guaranteed. Wow, when they put it like this, though, doesn't it sound nice? Right? If you know anything about China and what China is doing in the world, you read that first introductory paragraph and you say, what's there not to like? Knocking the dollar off its pedestal. What has the dollar done but been weaponized and destroy entire countries' economies? Washington's chokehold over critical technology. Where has the United States or anywhere else gone in many decades with technology other than making more souped up weapons to kill people with? We are actually moving backwards in so many ways because there's no investment. So maybe Washington needs to have a chokehold, its chokehold released over technology. And then common security and economic development. Oh my God, it's so scary. I'm so afraid now. I cannot believe I have to run away and I have to hide under the bed from this damn common security and economic development. It's just such a threat to my existence, right? This is how laughable these people are. To hear Xi tell it, this world is within reach. So blah blah blah. You know, he talks about whatever. Let's move on. Okay. Outside China, such brash self-congratulatory proclamations are disregarded or dismissed, including by American officials. It's easy to see why. A large number of China's plans appear to be failing or backfiring. This is, of course, foreign affairs trying to make themselves look good. Okay. So what they're not saying is how they're only polling the collective West, and they're saying that China's neighbors are drawing closer to Washington. Not necessarily true, but militarily, you could say that is true. And then polls indicate that Beijing is unpopular worldwide. A Pew Research study surveyed attitudes toward China in the United States in 24 countries. 28% found respondents' favorable opinion of Beijing, and just 23% said it contributes to global peace, while 60% said the United States contributes to peace and stability. Many of these countries, of course, they won't tell you, are just literal puppet states of the West, not ordinary citizens from the polls that we read off earlier. So which one is it? Arab youth, African people, people in Southeast Asia. They all are thinking of China more favorably, but yet somehow the United States is just more peaceful and more stable, right? It's just laughable. But Xi's vision is more formidable than it seems. So here comes the truth bombs. China's proposals would give power to many countries that have been frustrated and sidelined by the present order, but it would still afford the states Washington currently favors with valuable international roles. Beijing's initiatives are backed by a comprehensive, well-resourced, and disciplined operational strategy, one that features outreach to governments and people in seemingly every country. These techniques have gained Beijing newfound support, particularly in some multilateral organizations and from non-democracies. Basically, the entire global south is what they mean. China is succeeding in making itself an agent of welcome change while portraying the U.S. as a defender of the status quo that few particularly like, which most people would agree with. Most people who are thinking would agree with. Rather than dismissing Beijing's playbook, U.S. policymakers should learn from it. To win what will be a long-term competition, the United States must seize the mantle of change that China has claimed. Washington needs to articulate and push forward its own vision for a transformed international system and the U.S. role within it, one that is inclusive of countries at different economic levels and with different political systems. So do it. Do it. This is what's so funny. Overcapacity. China is just flooding the market with all of these goods, and it's so unfair. Well, why don't you produce the electric vehicles? Why don't you produce the high technology? Oh, you don't want to do it? Well, China has every right in a free market economy to produce what it wants. That's what trade and export is. That's basically all it is. Why don't you make an inclusive international system? Talk to every country's leaders like they're human beings, even if they're poorer than you, even if they live in places like the African continent, like West Asia and the Middle East. Why don't you talk to Bashar al-Assad like a human being? Oh, what, you can't do it because you want to wage war, and you only talk to leaders that will kiss your feet and bow to you and essentially allow you to do to their country what they want. Well, then that's not on China. Like China, the U.S. needs to invest deeply in technological, military, and diplomatic foundations that enable both leadership at home and abroad. Yet as the country commits to that competition, U.S. policymakers must understand that near-term stabilization of the bilateral relationship advances rather than hinders ultimate U.S. objectives. They should build on the summit. So this is what they're saying. They're scared of China right now. They know that China is in a lot better position than they are trying to let on. Okay? They want to win the long-term game because there is no short-term war here. But I want to just fast forward to here we go. I want to fast forward to this is the last part of this report I'm going to read. Okay? We don't have to read the whole thing. So, Beijing claims that its vision, by contrast to the United States, right? Dollar dominance, no country left behind. All countries are left behind by the United States. They want to build it not just on multipolarity, but absolute sovereignty, security rooted in international consensus, opposing a Cold War mentality, right? Opposing internal affairs of other countries, all that stuff. That's what China is advocating around the world. Now, Foreign Affairs says Beijing claims its vision, by contrast, advances the interests of the majority of the world's people. China is center stage, but every country, including the U.S., has a role to play. At the Munich Security Conference in February of 2024, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said that China and the U.S. are responsible for global strategic stability. China and Russia, meanwhile, represent an exploration for a new model of major country relations. China and the European Union are the world's two major markets and civilizations and should resist establishing blocs in ideology. And China, is what Wang called the largest developing country, promotes solidarity and cooperation with global South countries to increase representation in all global affairs. China's vision, they say, is designed to be compelling for nearly all countries. Those that are not democracies will have their choices validated. Those that are democracies but not major powers will gain a greater voice in the international system and a bigger share of the benefits of globalization. Even the major democratic powers can reflect on whether the current system is adequate for meeting today's challenges or that China has something better to offer. Observers in the U.S. and elsewhere may roll their eyes at the grandiose phrasing, but they do so at their peril. Dissatisfaction with the current international order has created a global audience more amenable to China's proposals than might have existed in the past, or might not have existed long ago. So, there you have it. What is Foreign Affairs saying? They are saying that China is constructing a legitimate alternative order, that many people, many countries around the world view that alternative order as preferable than what the United States has to offer, and that the United States ignores this or delegitimizes it or essentially rejects it and dismisses it at its own peril, because it's happening, because there's real dissatisfaction with what the United States is doing around the world. There is major dissatisfaction over what the Biden administration is doing in Gaza. He's probably going to lose the 24 election. It's almost completely guaranteed now. And every time Mr. Little Antony Blinky Blinken goes somewhere, look at how he is treated. Look at how he's treated in China. Look how he was treated in the Middle East several times when leaders like the Jordanian leader would, King, whatever his name is, the traitorous king that continues to leave Palestinians completely out to dry for mass murder and genocide. Jordan wouldn't even take Blinken for several hours. I believe they made him wait a full day on his last visit before seeing him. This is just absolutely the reality here. The reality here is that the United States has angered the entire world. It has made a mockery of international law. It has become a pariah of the world. And China is the exact opposite of that. That's why China is going to be okay. Because, just if you think about life, right? One of the major problems that human beings at an individual levels face is isolation. If you are isolated, if you don't have human contact at some level, everyone's different and everyone has what is considered adequate human contact. But if you have no human contact, just ask Julian Assange what it's like to have no human contact. Ask anyone who's been caught in solitary confinement for any extended period of time what it's like. It's torture, right? So isolation is a very, very bad thing. No matter how that's just objective. You can't philosophize or moralize out of that one. China understands that on the world stage, isolation is akin to destruction. And it is weighing these policies that the United States has been leveling upon Russia, and has, of course, been leveling upon the entire global South for many years now. The wars, the proxy wars, especially the economic sanctions. And what China has done is said, well, we have development priorities, we have China's national interests, and we also have a responsibility as a rapidly growing developing country that's soon going to be the biggest economy in the world. We have a responsibility to create a vision for what our role in the overall world order will be. China didn't create multipolarity. That is something that has come out of a whole host of nations. It's an idea that has come out of a whole host of developments, and China just happens to be one of the leaders of it. So China said, we're never going to be alone. actually one of the most genius moves from China as what it would call itself a socialist, a market socialist economy, was to introduce the world market. If China had stayed isolated in the late 1970s and said, we are going to continue to go down the path of rejecting Western investment, having an adversarial relationship with the West, even after admittance into the United Nations and recognized as the government of China, as the rightful government of China. If we continue to do that, if they said that, then China would be in a much more backward place than it is today. That's just a fact, right? China was one of the poorest countries in the world, even in 1978, even though it had made a lot of progress in some respects. But nonetheless, it was. It didn't really have any industrial base, so to speak, at all. So China said, well, we're not going to be alone. We're going to integrate, but we're going to do it with, as Foreign Affairs said, absolute sovereignty. It's not going to be what you see with the IMF and the World Bank all over the global south. It's not going to be open season for foreign corporations to essentially have free reign over another country's market and to do what they wish with it. It's not just resource grabbing, plundering, and pillaging. No. China said we will integrate into the world market, but we will be essential to it. We will stand up. We will continue to be tall. We will stand tall like we did when we formed New China in 1949. That's the reality of China. That's why people don't understand China. They think China is a country that bowed down to the West decades ago. Many people think this, and that it's just some Western playground. Nothing could be further from the truth. The truth is that China said we will not be isolated, we will not be alone, but that doesn't mean we will be dependent. And now it's all backfiring. Now the United States is trying to force its hand. It's trying to isolate China, and it will never work because the global South, the global majority stands with China. That is just proven. Do they stand with Antony Blinken, with Biden? No. These people are some of the most unpopular people in the world. And that is just fact. People are sick. The world is sick of the empire, sick of the empire. They don't want to hear it from the empire anymore. They don't want to hear it about Gaza, about Ukraine, about the U.S.'s role. They want it to stop. China, ask anyone in the global South these days that has any kind of rational brain. I was in a cab on my way back from the airport when I was dropped off a 16-hour flight from Beijing. Got in a cab. Pakistani guy. Wonderful guy. Charged me a good penny, but that's how it is at night at the airport. I told him where I was, told him where I went. He was like, China. Great. That's amazing. When I go to Pakistan, I can see all the development. He told me he sees the trains, he sees the infrastructure, the factories. He says most of it is just China. Like if it wasn't for China, Pakistan would have very little. He said he's taken the metro that China built. I believe it was launched in 2021 in Lahore, 2020 even. He's taken that. First metro system in Pakistan. China built it. You talked about the ports and the importance of connecting things and how he's seen that happen in real time with roads and other kinds of projects. It's incredible. That's just a random person. I just told him where I went, and then we had a conversation. So China is the future. China is okay. It's Antony Blinken. It's Biden. It's the empire, the American empire. It's got a lot of problems. And Blinken's reception, China's reaction to Blinken, and the entire situation that the American empire finds itself in is one that is going to go down in the history books as the beginning of the end of a whole epoch of history. It's the beginning of the end of the empire. And China, far from collapsing, is going to continue on its role of assuming global leadership and scaring the pants off of foreign affairs and neocons like them because they know the writing is on the wall. They know China is on the path that China wants to be on, and they know Russia's right there along with it, and they know where they go, the rest of the global south goes. So that's it for the stories, guys. I'll talk briefly about my trip. Let me do some shout outs first, and then I want to talk about a little bit about my trip with all of you. It's like a little bit of a bonus, and then I'll head out. Okay. So here we go. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. Keep hitting that like button, keep hitting the subscribe button, keep hitting that notifications bell. I first want to say hello to all the moderators. Hello to Desert Mantis, Quantum Alchemist. Who else do I see here? Thought I saw Joe OWS earlier. Usually Joe OWS is here. I don't see them now, but so hello to all of you. Where Pilgrim, I see you. I see some members as well. Maxwell, welcome. I don't know if there's any other members. The chat is not letting me go so far up today for some reason. But if there are any other members, big shout outs to all of you. And of course, Patreon. I think I saw someone who subscribes to my Patreon. So thanks so much for those of you who came from there. What else do we have? We have super chats. Okay, we have Basil who says, "Make America ours again." Okay, yeah, sure. Depending on who you are, I'm not sure who ours is, but how about we make an America that is just and free and truly worth being truly worth identifying with. Thank you, Rafa King of Clay. Said, Danny, isn't it true that China will never be close allies with America so long as they are arming Taiwan and supporting them militarily? Well, thank you, Rafa King of Clay. Yeah, that is 100% true. I mean, China was never close allies with the United States. China doesn't talk on those terms, first of all. China does not talk in terms of allies and adversaries. China talks in terms of win-win cooperation. China talks about treating all parties in any kind of relationship as equals. China talks about it. China says non-interference, non-interference, non-interference. Allies, and it rejects wholeheartedly. And whether you agree with this or not, indeed, in word, just read anything Wang Yi, Xi Jinping, anyone in China's political class, you will find that they reject block mentality 100%. But nonetheless, the relationship between the United States and China is irreparable and just completely, in my opinion, finished if the United States continues doing what it's doing with regard to Taiwan. There's no question about that. The relationship will never be on good footing. And it never really was on good footing for a long time because of this, especially during the period when the People's Republic of China was being excluded from its UN status, when it had sanctions imposed on it, pressured by the United States to keep it from being recognized as the rightful government of the nation of China. So it wasn't until opening up and reform, normalization, 1979 with the United States, that there came to be a framework from which a relationship could be developed. And that relationship developed to some degree, but it was never what you could call an alliance, or it could be considered allies. There was a lot of economic cooperation, but the United States never respected the One China principle. It continued to arm Taiwan. It passed the Taiwan Relations Act, justifying it. And it didn't do it to a significant degree for many years during the opening up reform period, the wild 90s, the early 21st century. And then, of course, when the pivot to Asia occurred under the Obama administration, boom, there became a huge influx that led to a huge influx of American weapons, of American logistical and military personnel, things like that, coordinating with Taiwan to prepare for this suicidal war that the United States finds itself in now. So since then, it's just been a non-starter. The relationship will always be tense. China has acknowledged this in almost every white paper, press conference from the foreign ministry. They'll acknowledge that the relationship is still rife with challenges, even when things appear to be going better on the surface. They'll say there's still many challenges. And so this is the big one. This is why whenever Wang Yi meets with whoever the F in Washington, says first and foremost, the one China principle is the big one. You need to follow it because guess what? That's international law. That's our law. That's our bilateral agreement. It's the United States is like someone who constantly violates the contract, but there's never any consequences for it. China, doesn't want to escalate in the international order, is not prepared to level consequences on the U.S. because of its outsized influence. So China is kind of left with follow the agreement, follow international law. That's what you should be doing. That's how we can repair this relationship. And the United States always says no. The United States says Taiwan's too important. It's got to be our unsinkable aircraft carrier for the future war with you. So no, we cannot stop interfering in your internal affairs. So yeah, that's not going to stop. That's only going to continue. There's not a presidential candidate or a political force in the United States strong enough to assume power within the current structure that will reverse that policy. So we can really bet that is going to continue. So thank you. Let's see. I would love to see you as a regular on Judge Napolitano's show to talk China, other geopolitics. Your analysis would be a good addition. Scott can make it happen. Thanks for sharing knowledge. That's a good idea, actually. I've thought about that. I've thought about just reaching out independently too, but maybe I could ask Scott to put in a good word because I noticed I really do appreciate that he has been bringing on so many anti-war voices to his audience, and so I would be open if he would have me on to introduce them to a different perspective on China. And of course, I know I speak about China a very particular way, but I can be sophisticated. I know what's most important. Shadowless Kick says no John Mearsheimer. Well, I reacted. New member, Korkut Irturk. Man, I hope I am not. I'm probably butchering your name, Korkut Irturk. Anyway, in any event, thank you so much. Sorry for my United States tongue there. So, duly noted says, is it too far-fetched to think that the U.S. also told Israel they can go ahead and continue into Rafah as long as they don't escalate with Iran? I don't think it's far-fetched. I don't know if that's the full story. Those reports came out, and I thought they were 100% true, but it's unclear whether they're 100% true. I'm sure it's 100% true that conversation happened. It's not verified that was what was agreed upon. And it's unclear which side would propose this, right? Because I think that it could come from either side. I could see the Israelis saying, we can't really do it with Iran anyway. So if you tell people that we can go into Rafah, that helps us. You give us backing to do that, and it helps you because we won't escalate to the point of conflict. I could see Israel, for as much as I don't think they are the dog wagging the U.S. tail, I don't think that they are controlling the U.S. Let's be honest. Just because you don't have control over something doesn't mean you can't assert leverage based on your absolute necessity to the U.S. imperial project. Just like, just like children, right? Children with their parents. Just because the parents supposedly have the power, they're managing the affairs. They're the ones who basically are responsible for their safety. Children get what they want all the time from their parents when they assert leverage in so many ways, emotional, material, what have you. That just happens all the time. So I wouldn't put it past Israel to have said, hey, this is the situation. We want to invade Rafah. We don't have world public support. You got to help us because we got Iran right there. And we just don't care about the consequences because we know that you would be hard pressed not to come to our aid, right? It's almost like this, it's this, how should I put it? the jet lag is still here with me mentally. But it's really like a game of chicken. It's a game, or even a game of chess, although I don't think they're sophisticated enough to be playing chess. But what Israel I could see doing is saying, we got you where we want you. We don't control you. I don't think they control the United States, but we got you where we want you. I think that's been the case for a long time, especially with regard to Israel's political influence. So I don't think it's too far-fetched. I don't know if it exactly happened like the report said, because the reports are always trying to make the United States look like a powerful arbiter here. They're trying to make it always says, okay, the United States is doing such a thing, is kind of influencing affairs. And so, you can just trust the United States to, do the right thing, or even if it's doing the wrong thing, the United States is strong. I don't believe that's what's happening here at all. I believe the United States is incredibly vulnerable in this region, and Israel is taking it all the way to the bank, or the genocide bank, I should say. Like, they're just taking advantage of this. That's my opinion. The Iranian Putin says, I only listen to Ben Hodges in regard to Ukraine. Interesting. Thanks for your super chat. Well, thanks for this very generous super chat from observation. Okay. All right. Island nations should desire strong relations with their respective mainland in case of tectonic emergency, or for better days, freedom to not be stuck in one place. Interesting. Well, what's interesting about that, if this is in relation to Taiwan, as people like Xiang Yu, who I've had on the show, Carl Jia, they'll say Taiwan was never really a nation that even when Chiang Kai-shek decided to flee, he wanted to be the rightful leader of all of China as part of the Republic of China. If you go back further, the ties between the mainland and the island are so deep that it's just recently that this kind of political reshaping of the local authority on the island, the kind of one China, two systems model that China also instituted in Hong Kong during the rebalancing. Taiwan has a version of that. It's not the same, because Taiwan, although it is coming out of a colonial situation from many years ago, different kind of dynamics, but still, nonetheless, it is still true that there's been thousands of years of Chinese kind of relations, right? That Taiwan cannot be seen as separate from. It's not like a Puerto Rico, right? It's not like the Philippines, right? Because the United States tried to colonize and dominate the Philippines in that way. No, it's not completely outside of the sphere of China. It is a huge part of what China has been about. So, and what China has been even before it was a formal nation state, in more of a kind of a feudal, semi-feudal, imperial dynasty of sorts. So, nonetheless, that point is still good, though. Observation. When you say they should want strong relations, I think even if Taiwan never was a nation, or could ever be considered a nation, we have to understand that Taiwan would be far better off connected to the mainland than not. There's just no doubt about that. All right, everybody. So that's it for the super chats and shout outs. So let me just talk about my trip really quickly. I will try to share the screen. Let me open. I have photos and pics, but it's just really hard to organize. I didn't have the time to organize it in a great way, but I do have a so what I'll do is I'll just open up while I'm talking and show you kind of what was going on while I was there. I wish I could make these bigger, honestly. I'll put it in gallery view, and then I'll just pull it up when I feel like it's good stuff. Okay. Okay, so here, so yeah, all right, so I'll just give you a quick background on my trip. So I went with the CNIE, China Network for International Exchanges, the China NGO, as they call it. I love China's NGO names. You can definitely tell that China does not do NGOs like the United States or the West does them. They're not private foundations that are unaccountable to anything. No, they are accountable to the government. They are regulated by the government, and they follow government regulations. It's much different than in the United States or the West, where you go to some travel. If you were to go with if you were to do people-to-people stuff, you might very well be doing it with a private company. Most tourism is private. China is a little different, especially around tours that are supposed to have meaning. So I went with this organization, and they were hosting Friends of Socialist China, which Carlos Martinez and myself actually helped co-found, but he has assumed much of the labor for that project, basically compiling resources, holding events, things like that, educating people about China, against the kind of Cold War propaganda that we hear about. Keith Bennett is also one of the hosts, one of the editors and founders of Friends of Socialist China, longtime friend of China, has done many years of business, has been to China, the DPRK, has been involved in politics and the movement for many, many, many years, a wealth of knowledge. I mean, he's one of the most well-informed people I know, and he's been to China so many times since dating back to, the early opening up and reform period. So they organized a delegation, most of the people from the UK, but I was with Margaret Kimberley, a Black Agenda reporter as well. It was our first trip to China. It was great traveling with her. And we went with a delegation, most people from the UK, many different kinds of activists, people who have been kind of following Friends of Socialist China and doing some work in the UK. So it was a great group, and there was a few people who were of Irish descent. Only one of them resided in Ireland, and one of them resided in the UK. But a great group of people. It's always good to go with people who don't do anything obnoxious, which I don't know if you've traveled with, especially Westerners, to places like China. It can get pretty bad. And so I always think of someone like Otto. There's an Otto Warmbier from his nefarious activities in the DPRK. In a lot of people in the West, he took it to the gravest and most ridiculous extreme. But there's a little bit of that in a lot of people in the West, just like a lack of respect. They don't really know how to respect countries and nations and peoples who they've been taught are inferior, and so they behave really poorly. And I've been on trips like that. My first trip to China was kind of like that. Nonetheless, we were in Beijing. Then we went to a province called Zhejiang province, which is north of Shanghai and is actually the focal point of where the Communist Party of China was founded. They fled from Shanghai on a boat to Zhejiang, and that's where they officially formed the Communist Party of China after being raided by French Quarter police and forced to flee. So watch the film 1921. It's a great Chinese film. I don't know if it's on YouTube, but you should watch it. Nonetheless, we went there. We did meetings, tourism. We stayed at a party school. A party school. Yes. We stayed at a party school where they train Communist Party youth, people who are training, young people, young adults, mainly college student age, generally. And it was a really interesting experience, so to speak. To see what they're doing, to attend lectures of things that they learn. So really getting immersed in the real Chinese experience, the experience that, many people out of the 100 million or so Communist Party of China members experience every single day in some part of the country. So nonetheless, we had tourism, we had meetings, we went to Zhejiang province, we ended the trip in Jilin, which is on the DPRK border. And we also had meetings with, for example, the Provincial Communist Party of China leadership there. We also had a meeting with Jilin University. And so that's just kind of the broad scope of what we were doing. We were basically seeing Chinese modernization and Chinese socialism in the 21st century, understanding what they're talking about, understanding what they're thinking, what China's leadership is thinking for the future of these questions, and of course, seeing it up close. Right? We went to, for example, in Jilin, We went to agricultural cooperative, witnessed what they're doing there, how they grow their food, their corn. We went to you know, where else did we go in what else did we go? This is my brain going goodbye. But nonetheless, yeah, we went to an agricultural cooperative. We went to, for example, we learned about the car industry, the automotive industry, where, you know, the first car Chinese vehicle was produced. They have a whole museum about that. But nonetheless, let me go through some photos and that will jog my memory even more. Okay, so all right, so here we go. Let me see if I can just, I'll share from the gallery, and then it might not be the most pretty thing. Okay, so here we go. So here is the red building in Beijing. So this is essentially where the Communist Party of China was formed, in Beijing. And it's a whole museum, okay, dedicated to that that process. All right. And I'll just show you a bit inside. Okay, let me just I don't know if I can do, how do I do this with that? With it, will it just share? If I open this, can you see that? No. Okay. So this is this is going to be a little how should I say, messy, but anyway, let me just close this up. This might take a while. So I'll show you just important photos, okay? So here is, can you see this? Let me share this. You can see it's probably not so big though, huh? I wish let's see. What if I do that? Does that make it bigger? No. All right, you can't see that. I wish the screen share feature was a little more sophisticated, but let's stop sharing that. So I'm just gonna have to do this a little rudimentary style. Bear with me here. All right, here we go. So here's inside the museum. You know, this is a room of the May 4th movement. Okay, so these are the banners they made. So for those who don't know, the May 4th movement was about the Treaty of Versailles and eventually, and really what happened was that China, it was a political movement, okay, in Shandong, or it was about the territories of Shandong, where it was so Germany after World War I had to surrender these territories, all right, Chinese territories. And the Treaty of Versailles basically said that they could, that Japan could keep them. And that created uproar because Shandong is in China. And essentially what it said was the Western powers said that it was okay for them to, for Japan to keep them and screw China. All right. So that was basically the, I just want to show you another thing. I'll show you a really beautiful painting of the May 4th movement uprising. This was seen as one of the precursors to New China. Okay. So the May 4th movement, incredibly important. That huge student movement created a huge impetus for political development in China. The October Revolution had happened and socialism started to become more of a conversation. Here's that beautiful painting I wanted to share with you. So there it is. It's this is a painting of the May 4th movement, of the gathering in what is now the Tiananmen Square, of students looking to protest outside of the embassy. Okay. So yeah. So there you go. There you go. Outside of the various Western embassies that were planted inside of China at that time. You could say occupied. So nonetheless, let me find you some more photos. Okay, let me find you some more photos of what I saw there. Where is that gallery now? There it is. All right. So essentially, okay, I don't want to just go through museum stuff because I could literally talk about that. So if you want to see something interesting, let's see. Oh, here we go. So here is Mao's. Let's see. Sorry. Bear with me here. Boom. Okay. Some interesting things in this museum were, for example, here's a copy of the Communist Manifesto in English that Mao Zedong actually took notes in and was reading. So, it took a while for the Communist Manifesto to actually be translated into Chinese. And so they were reading it in English. And there you have Mao's notes all over this photo. And so they had the original of that in this museum. So this is just the history of, important, events and artifacts related to the formation of the Communist Party of China in Beijing. So I'll show you some scenes of Beijing. Okay, so here we go. Let's see. What is this going on here? All right. So I don't know, you just go through Beijing. I'll show you one photo here. Beijing's a very clean place. What I love about Beijing is that in many parts of Beijing, it's not just clean, it's very quiet. This is the middle of lunch hour in Beijing. It's not a sleepy place. There are businesses here. Many people work here. But you'll never feel congested. That's one of my favorite parts about Beijing, actually, is you don't feel like you are suffocating like I have felt in many U.S. cities, especially in the busy areas. You can find busy areas, especially if you're going shopping as a tourist. But nonetheless, the fact of the matter is many times you will feel very like you can breathe, in a very urbanized area. And I think that's very intentional. It's obvious this was planned that way. And, I don't believe Shanghai feels like that. So I've been to Shanghai. I don't think Shanghai feels like that. Shanghai feels a little more, almost like a claustrophobic. Like I do feel like the walls are closing in on me sometimes. I did feel like that a bit when I was in Shanghai. Nonetheless, I want to show you another thing. One of the best moments of this trip, one of the most really humbling moments of this trip. How do I get this away? And I'm going to show you one of the most humbling moments of this trip for me. Okay, was it really? Okay, well, I got to go all the way back. Here we go. Let me just find the photo. One of the most humbling trip was the fact. So you may see here. That's the Chinese translation of my book on American exceptionalism. Actually, I think it translates to something like Empire of Hypocrisy or something. An incredible translation. But that happened in 2022. I was asked, someone in the Global Times said they knew a translator, worked for a publisher called World Press Publishing, and they wanted to translate. And I just said, yeah, I would love to have my book be accessible in China. They did it. I did a little interview over internet, like a typed up interview to talk about the book, which was disseminated as well. But I had no idea I was actually going to visit as part of my itinerary this publishing house, which actually happens to be the publisher of the International Department of the Communist Party of China, or at least affiliated with the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China's International Department. I didn't know that, but nonetheless, that's what happened. Okay. And here's a photo of me. I'll just show you now with the president of the publisher. Here he is. Here I am. Okay. Holding up the book. I actually signed many of these books while I was there because I don't think they were aware that I was also coming. So it was a really nice moment for me. I just thought it was really cool. Because a lot of actually folks on the trip wanted to publish their books or their books of their organizations or something in Chinese and build a relationship. And it was just cool that that already happened. And I didn't even know because I was not familiar with the publisher. It was I think it's Contemporary World Press Publishing. I was not familiar with them. And so when I looked at the itinerary for Beijing, I was like, wait, is that the same publisher? So it happened to be. So it was great. And it's really cool because they said it sold thousands of copies. They were actually wanting me. I don't know if this will happen, but they do want me to update the update the book. I don't know if I'll do that yet, but it may be at some point. They want me to update it, talk more about China, maybe talk more about what I talk about now. They thought, it would be great to make a whole nother edition, maybe just with them. So really cool opportunity. I met some fans there, which was also really kind of humbling as well, not to toot my own horn, but here is actually a woman who actually is not native to China. Like she doesn't live there full time, but she was visiting. And she watches the channel. She watches me. She watches George Galloway. She watches all basically the channels that cover international politics. And we saw each other outside of the Forbidden City, which we didn't go to this time around, but we were around that area of Beijing. So there we are, me meeting a fan. So that's just one. And so that was another big highlight for this trip. So let me just keep looking, and I'll show you the scene outside the Forbidden City is actually quite pretty, but let's see if I can find something. Oh yeah. Okay. It doesn't look like all the photos actually downloaded or videos. Okay. So let me share with you now. Where is it? Okay. All right. Sorry, I have to like open the photos from the gallery so it's big enough for you all to see in a good way, and then share the screen. So here we go. So this is outside of the Forbidden City. Really pretty park. I'm hoping that the gallery has, let me look, in list form. No. Okay, let me see if I have the video in here of the time at the park. Yes, I probably do. Where is it? What's this? No, that's not it. Because I want to show you some of the activities at the parks that we were at. Because the parks in China are just really nice. Maybe it didn't download. Oh, that would be a big bummer if they didn't get to. Let's see. Sorry about this. This has been more difficult than I thought. Oh yeah. Okay, they're there. I just have to find them. All right. So let's continue. Stop the screen. Let me just go through more of the gallery. Okay. All right. So, all right. So some more highlights. I don't think I'll be able to show you all of the events of the trip in the next 15 minutes. That's how much time I'm going to dedicate to this now. I'll show you some really interesting pictures and just things that were kind of stunning to me, honestly. I mean, like Hangzhou. We went to Hangzhou just for a single day. It's the wealthiest city in China. But I mean, some of the architecture there is just like, wow, you're just kind of just blown away by the development in China in a lot of respects, or at least I am, because it feels so big and just really modern, and it's just kind of shocking, right? Like, and also green. There's a lot of green. It's just different than what I'm used to in the US. So okay, so I pulled up a few. So here is the municipal building in Hangzhou, right? I mean, this is just a big building, really nice, and also surrounded by trees. So that was just incredible. And then here's another one. So, I'm just giving you a sense of the architecture, just huge, right? We're just talking about huge buildings. And also surrounded by parks. Like, that's what's a really nice thing about China, is that they have actually invested in a lot of green space. And it's very clear when you're there that that's what has been happening. And so just one last one Did I show this one already? I don't think so. So just, just really big, really open. This is right outside the municipal building. It's just these kind of things that kind of leave you like, whoa, like China is huge. What else? Okay, let's keep going. So, okay. I want to show you in Zhejiang. One of the highlights of the trip for me was in Zhejiang. We went to a city named called Jiaxing. And in Jiaxing, let me go all the way back. I've got to go all the way back to this because in Jiaxing, they have a party masses building. Oh my God, this building was just it. So basically, Jiaxing is a very small city of 5 million or so. Maybe I've got that wrong. But in any event, this building is for the people. I mean, it's a service center called the Party Masses Service Center. And I'm going to just show you a photo of what it looks like looking out to it. I mean, it's just massive. Like I'm just going to pull up a lot of these photos for you just to show you what it looks like and then also what it provides. Did it open? What the hell? Come on, bro. Come on, bro. You're getting the real chill side of this because this isn't actually going to be a story of mine. Why isn't it opening? There we go. All right. Being a pain in my butt, but here we go. All right. Here we go. Just opening up a little bit what they provide, just so you get a sense of what common prosperity really means. It's not just building businesses and economic opportunities. It's also about increasing the level of social welfare. And so we got a big sense of that at this Party Masses Service Center. It was really shocking, but I just want to show you it's like, this is incredible. Like, whoa. Like when I walked in it, I was just like, what? This is a small city. Okay, this is not a big city. And I was just like, what? Where am I right now? Like this is a huge building and it essentially is all filled with service. There's a cafe, there's a library, there's childcare, there's healthcare, there's mental health services, and I'll just show you a few of those things. But it was just a huge, huge building. I was just like, and here's another look from a different angle. Okay. So, just many floors, all having some kind of purpose and service. All right. And then they had like a human development kind of education area where if you needed help with childcare, if you needed help with like understanding what's going on with you, it's like, just education and instruction. There were computers to get you some help on like, if you needed better help understanding, for example, what you need to do to, attach and bond with your child, what you need to learn. I mean, they had these kind of instructions and, you could consult with someone virtually mainly, but if you need someone in person, that could be arranged. And then here they are talking about the free mental health services. So basically, they're just talking to us about how you can go to one of these iPads or, tablets and essentially document what's going on with you. And then you can book and schedule an appointment if you need therapy. And it is free. So a pretty incredible thing to witness. It was that was one of the big highlights for me, was going to the service center, because you hear common prosperity all the time. You hear about lifting people's standard of living, and oftentimes it's focused on the economics, which is important. But at the same time, what's also important is, people's needs, Okay. And China is also attempting to meet that as well. All right. So I'll just show you a few other things from the trip. Okay. Where are we? I want to show you the buildings because we went to a smart city in Hangzhou. And some people say smart cities, that's a WEF nightmare. Well, in China, they're making it very relatively affordable to live kind of easy. Okay. So, and I'll show you some nice photos as well. I'm just opening up some so I can look through, so I can easily easily share it. All right, I'm not going to share everything here. Let's move on. Oh yeah, okay. So this is beautiful. I'll show you this. We went to the National Tea Museum, but actually outside of the Tea Museum was more beautiful. I'll show you this as well. The devilish AI being used for human purposes was kind of incredible. Some humorous things I'll throw in there. Sorry, I'm just opening up all this stuff so I can more easily share it on the screen later. All right, this is what I want to share. Definitely. Is this a movie? Yes. All right. So that video I definitely want to share. Sorry. So bear with me, guys. Bear with me. Okay, this looks like Changchuan. Changchuan was very nice. So I'm just gonna give you a flavor of like, these are like areas too you may not even refer to or like be familiar with. Or just go to. People don't go to these for like tourism normally anyway. It's like this was more people to people stuff. So I'll show you some of the cooperative. I want to show you something funny too. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. So I'm just pulling up all these photos. Hopefully it doesn't destroy my computer. It's just taking a while to open these. All right, let's stop here and then I'll keep going after that. All right, so let's see. Okay. All right, back to the stream. All right, 2800 still with me. All right, guys. All right. Here we go. So let me share what I pulled up here. Let's see which one to choose first. So let's go from the bottom. So yes, we went to a smart city. Here it is. Can I share more than one? No. All right. So here's the smart city in Hangzhou. These buildings right here. You might see my arrow on it. It's not a WEF conspiracy. Basically, it is a government-backed initiative that is supposed to create very reliable housing for those in the emerging middle classes of all ages. I believe the average amount to buy an apartment is like $42,000. Not cheap in RMB standards, to be frank. But for the emerging middle classes with surplus income, with disposable income, this is actually not a necessarily unaffordable option, especially in China, where let's say you are in this emerging middle class arena, perhaps even your family, even if your family was rural workers or factory workers for many years, it's likely they saved up a good chunk of money to help pay off a mortgage. And so $42,000 may be very doable. So, nonetheless, okay, that's the smart city, but I want to show you other components of it because I think it was quite interesting. Here's one component of it, and that is they had a gym. They have like amenities, right? So here's the gym, but the gym isn't just any gym. Okay, the gym has technology that can help you tailor your workouts based on your medical condition, your age, your medical conditions, your age, your goals. So they have these computers all across the gym area, and they also have a separate gym for those who have, disabilities. Maybe you're more frail, maybe you're an older adult, an elderly. They have machines that are tailored toward people with disabilities. So they have so this is actually the machine for people in that room, where basically it's like an assessment. It's all, it's all about safe. Chinese people love their safety. They love to feel secure about their needs and health and whatnot. So I thought that was a really cool thing. Okay. And then we went, let's see. I just want to continue. Let's see. And then, they have some kind of, did it just come up? Sorry about that. Here we go. I didn't know it was just going to come up. So here's a video game room for kids, for probably boys who want to play video games. They have the video games there. It's like communal. Okay. So it's something that's invested in by the smart city. Very interesting. And we made some jokes whether Nintendo was going to sue them for trademark, given the relationship between the United States, Japan, and China, the US/Japan and China. So anyway, let me show you now other parts. Okay. Here's just a really nice rural area outside of Hangzhou. Okay. And basically it's on the water. It's for tourism. Very beautiful. I just want to show you one part of that scene. You take pictures. A lot of people are doing social media stuff there. Very chill scene. It's basically like a business district for what once was a very rural area, and now it's for doing business. It's like the businesses for a lot of these rural people, they go there and they do business for tourists. And then the agriculture. Okay, so let's go to Changchun. That was like the last stop, but I just want to show you photos of what it looked like. Very small city as well, but very beautiful. There's a little night market. It was an off day. I believe it was sometime during the week. So people, depending on where you are, some areas are more lively than others. This one was kind of sleepy, but still very, very nice. Weather was perfect. It was like 70 degrees and dry in this area. Hangzhou, different story. Beijing, different story. They were both like 80 degrees and humid. But let's see. Anything else I want to show you here? Here's outside of the tea museum I think that was in Changchun in Jilin. And it's just people farming tea. China grows a lot of tea, and you get a chance to see people farm tea. You don't see that very often. Tea plants. Let's see. So, China's a really cool place. I mean, there's just so many things you can see. So then we went to here's another site of Changchun, just urban. Like what I say about China is that it's so-called third tier cities, second tier cities, it's lower tier cities. It's like if you lived in the United States or maybe parts of Europe too, where there's things called the suburbs, and those suburbs were urbanized, or those rural areas were urbanized. So that's how it feels in these lower tier cities. Fewer people, maybe it feels like a town, but it's urbanized. It's developed to the point where people in this town are living very, how should I say, urban lives. Like they're living like they're in the city. So that's what's really interesting. Okay, it's really interesting about China. I don't think I've seen that in the U.S. or in the West, so to speak. You have the cities in the West, and then you have towns or suburbs or whatever. China is a big rural area, but the cities that they're developing are all kind of coming up to the same level. You wouldn't be able to say that about the U.S. It's never going to bring certain cities to the level of New York or San Francisco, for example. That's just not going to happen in, I don't know, I don't even know what a good city, Houston. Like Houston will never be what San Francisco is, right? Like it just won't. In terms of the level of investment and things like that. Although we all know San Francisco has a lot of problems, but that's U.S. context stuff. I'm just talking about this broadly in terms of how China might see it. So anyway, let me just keep it moving. Okay, let me keep it moving. In the tea museum here, you may be wondering, why am I showing you this? Well, this is a video about how tea is made. And as you can see here, there is this woman, who is doing sign language. So all across the tea museum, they had sign language in AI. So for people who couldn't hear, they gave that option. There was closed captioning, but they still gave the sign language option in case people wanted to or needed to use it. So pretty cool, right? AI doesn't have to be bad. All right, let's just say that. It depends on how you use things like AI. And interesting enough, China doesn't allow AI on the consumer market. It's not something that you can buy and say like, "Oh, I'm going to use Chat GPT or something like that." China does it at the business level and the government level. Like they're starting it out there. They're not. That's the big debate, right? How do you regulate AI? And China said, well, we regulate AI by testing it out at the levels of leadership and investment, so we can assert regulations before it's rolled out to the general population in a big way. So let's go to the agricultural cooperative. Okay. Well, actually, these are kind of random, actually, but let me just go to the agricultural cooperative to show you. Here's the scenes outside. Lots of hammer and sickles everywhere. Lots of Xi Jinping everywhere. So this is agricultural cooperative in China, in Jilin. And at this agricultural cooperative, okay, you see some things like, just basic farming things. Like they just showed us around the place. Basically, it's like farmers who are pulling together their resources to develop and to use their technology, spend money, and grow their individual businesses, and also do it for the national interests. So here's some just like, the machines that they're using. Interestingly enough, I don't have a good shot of it, but they used a lot of renewable energy there, a lot of windmills, a lot of solar panels everywhere. And just here's a scene. They grow a lot of corn off season, so it's not there. It's just a big mound of dirt, but they grow a lot of corn in this agricultural cooperative in Jilin. Anything else I want to show you there? No, I'll just show you this photo. Okay, this is the big scandal here. Winnie the Pooh in China. I got this. I can't believe it. I got Winnie the Pooh in China. All right, I thought Winnie the Pooh was banned. Right, this whole time I'm thinking Winnie the Pooh, I've been told, is banned. And then I go shopping at a little gift shop, and suddenly I've got Winnie the Pooh right at my fingertips. It was just like, it was just hilarious that I got this. But I'm trying to find, actually, I thought I had opened more than this. I thought I had opened a movie, but I guess I did not. So I'll just try to find it for all of you again. Because I want to show you the park. So I'm getting lost in the tabs. So I got Winnie the Pooh as a bag. I still have that bag. Actually, I'm going to save that forever to prove to all of the China watchers that Winnie the Pooh is in fact not banned in China. Believe it or not. Believe it or not. So, the agricultural cooperative was interesting to learn and see. But it was more just like to show us that this is what China is doing to help modernize agriculture. They're pulling together people's resources, and they're trying to lift people's standard of living. So then we had a meeting. Let me just open up all this. Okay, let me just actually quit all these photos so I can just start again. So then we had a meeting with the provincial. I'll just show you a few photos from this provincial Communist Party of China in Jilin. They met with us, and I also met a fan at Jilin University because we also went there. Ate some Korean food, ethnic Korean food in China. So a lot of interesting things. Where's the video? No, this is it? No way. Sorry, I'm just baffled. When I open it in gallery, it's definitely not showing me all of them. So I need to open up as a list and hope for the best here. Open it up, not of the list. Listen, icons. Okay, because I want to show you some video as well of just like activity at the parks, and then we'll end it at that. How about that? Because it's getting late. I gotta go to bed. I just want to give you a taste of what I did on my trip. I couldn't prepare this better, unfortunately, due to a lack of time. All right, I know what I'm gonna do. There's a list. I gotta get it as the kind. I gotta go to a movie. I want to play some of the park stuff, not this one. Oh, here we go. I got one open. Any other park stuff? No, but this. Okay, yeah, I have some. I have some good movies here as well, like short videos. No, that's not interesting. Eh, let's see. Sorry about this. Sorry about this. Bear with me. Bear with me. No, I don't want that. Okay, one in the park. What's this? Oh, me playing basketball. I don't know if you're interested in that. Maybe you are. Maybe you are. Maybe I'll put that. I'll put that in there so I can toot my own horn about how I used to be a good basketball player. All right. Yeah, so I'm opening up a lot just now, just to, as a last gasp of this very, I know probably it's difficult. Thanks for your patience for those who remained here. But I thought it was important to share with all of you, whoever wanted to see what I was doing, to see some of it. All right. It wasn't perfect, but I hope that you got something out of it. So let me see. Where do I begin? Where do I begin? Where do I begin? Okay, lots of stuff pulled up. Let's see here. So this is in the Communist Party of China provincial building, big statue of Marx and Engels, which we all got photos in front of, predictably. And then I'll show you, nice welcome from them, welcoming us. We had a nice conversation about development in Jilin. Jilin is actually a rising province. It is actually at the center. They produce all of the high-speed rail there. They're in terms of manufacturing, as well as electric vehicles and other transportation and other kinds of renewable energy technology. So a very interesting place, Jilin, right on the Korean border. So pretty interesting. And then here is the food we ate. Here is the ethnic Korean food. As you can see, a very big, wide assortment. It's different than what you get at like a Korean restaurant, which is mainly South Korean in the West. Very good though, very good. Really enjoyed that. And also the room we ate in was called Pyongyang, which was hilarious. So, the ethnic Korean population in China has a pretty deep relationship to DPRK. There, of course, is the big relationship. China volunteered a million plus people, 200,000 died, I believe, but more than a million, probably a couple million. China invested millions of people into Korea's liberation. 200,000 people died. And also, many Koreans fought before the Chinese Revolution in China as well, because Japan was also a thing, a colonial entity in Korea as well. So there's a lot of shared history there, and there's an ethnic Korean population. Okay, here's the fan, Jilin University. We went and we talked to folks at Jilin University. She came up to me and said, I watch you on YouTube. And I said, I got to get a picture with you because that's really cool. It was the Jilin University School of Marxism. So that was really humbling as well, to meet someone who watches my show all the way in Jilin. So let's see. So the park situation, guys. I love parks in China. So I'm just going to play a small video. I had many of these, but here's just one. People just getting down, people have fun in China, man. It's like, it's really cool. So let me play this for you all if I can get to it. Is this it right here? So there you go. People just having fun. You see that everywhere in parks all over China, singing, dancing, karaoke. It's a lot of retirees, especially, like to do that. Very cool, very cool, very cool. Let's see. And then here is actually back in the service center. I want to show you their childcare center. Here we go. Let me see if I can play this. Really cool. Here's their childcare center. Is that it? Wow, that was a quick 8 seconds. All right, here we go. So anyway, they were just talking to us about childcare and how they do it. So anyway, I've jumped around from places. So that was in Zhejiang, and then I was just showing you stuff in Jilin. So sorry for the lack of organization there, but nonetheless, you get a picture of China. Lastly, but not least, here is my former life. At the party school. They had a basketball court, so I decided to shoot around. So let's watch that. If you didn't see me on social media doing it, and then we'll end it there. All right. It was a great trip. I'm going back in August. Actually, sorry, I just have to actually find this video. Where is it? On my computer. Not that one. Not that one. It's this one. Boom. All right. Here we go. They weren't oohing and eyeing me. There was people from the trip playing volleyball across the way. That was it. No one was really looking to me other than Carlos, who was taking that video. All right. My former life. That's what I used to do. All right. I used to play a lot of basketball. In any event, that's the China trip in a little bit of a nutshell. Okay. Someone said I missed the third one. I didn't take a third one there, but I was very rusty and I missed a lot of shots. I made sure I was really warm when I took that video. So, all right. Last but not least, a few announcements. Okay, guys. By the way, did someone? Oh, okay. Someone just. Oh, okay. Weird. Someone sent me on PayPal 7 cents, but really it was $10 and some weird fee. All right. Last but not least, some announcements before I head out of here because I really got to go. I'm way past my bedtime. Tuesday, Scott Ritter will be on the program. Okay. He'll join me Tuesday, April 30th. Pepe Escobar, Thursday morning, May 2nd. And then someone says I always have a perfect hair day. Is that true? I always feel like I have a bad hair day. Just don't look in the back here. All right. Those are 2 guests coming on. Richard Medhurst, May 8th as well. So we got some good stuff coming on. All right. So please do subscribe to the channel, follow the channel. I'm noticing some shadow banning, guys. So if you could be so kind on my video clips, whenever you see them posted, just hit that like button whenever you see them posted. Watch them later, or don't if you feel like you've watched the stream already, because that's what I do. But it's really important. Like the clips when they come out. They're usually 4 p.m. Eastern weekdays, 2 p.m. Eastern weekends, with a day off here and there. But I'm noticing that there's some algorithmic stuff going on, and I have a feeling it might be because I hit 200,000 subscribers here, which is incredible. But YouTube has a way of in with the new, out with the old, in with the new kind of thing. And I feel like because of the content here, I was kind of expecting this to happen eventually. But in any event, I just want to say, like the content, streams, videos, if you can. Scott Ritter, April 30th, May 2nd, Pepe Escobar. Be on the lookout for dates, community posts, etc. And then May 8th, Richard Medhurst, and then maybe some things in between or whatever. But that's what I got going on for now. With all that said, everyone, it's been a great show. I'm going to head out. Be sure before you leave, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notifications bell, and be sure to go to the video description, subscribe annually on Patreon. You can also subscribe annually on Substack. You become a YouTube member monthly. You can also donate to PayPal, buy me a coffee, plenty of options. But do support the show financially because it helps keep this work sustainable, and it helps me to be able to coordinate these kind of trips. I am going back in August to China with a bit tentatively with a media organization, which I will not name just yet, but I will be doing video work with them, and they'll be providing me with some institutional support for that infrastructure, I should say, to do some really cool things, get some really cool interviews. I'm hoping to get some higher profile interviews. I did some walkthroughs, as you could see, with some of my delegates, some conversations with some of the people I went with on this trip. You can find that on the channel. Really cool guy, Ali Al-Assam, an Iraqi who lives in the UK, who lives in London, did a really great analysis of things in the Middle East. Check that out on my channel. Graham Harrington of the Communist Party of Ireland did a great walkthrough in Jilin, talking to him about Ukraine, Ireland, Europe, and then, of course, Iran and China. And then, of course, I had a conversation with Margaret Kimberly, chief editor at Black Agenda Report, in the hotel. So you don't get to see much of China in that one, but still a great conversation. So check that out. All those videos are available. That was kind of the work I did in China in terms of video work and interviews. I didn't have any time really to do anything else. It was a packed delegation, but this next one I'm going on in August. It's going to be great. I'm going to be in Xinjiang. I'm going to be doing video work there, showing you the real Xinjiang. Then I am going, then I'm going to hopefully have some higher profile interviews in the big cities. Hopefully going on a high-speed rail, showing you that with camera folks. So that will be, because I'll have more support. It's not just me, my iPhone, a selfie stick, Rode mics. That will be exciting. So the end of August, early September, hopefully, but the date is still tentative, but I'll let you all know. All right. With that said, everybody, I am out of here. Take care. Hit up the video description for all the ways you can support this channel. Drop a like before you go, and I will see you all again in a couple days. Bye-bye.